Welcome back. We're going to talk about data integrity now. Regardless of the type of research that you're doing, you've probably got some data that you're using, right? You may have a lot of data. So, how do you store your data? How do you protect it? How do you keep it confidential? What do you do with your data? Think about this for a second. It's becoming increasingly important that we have access to our data, that we share our data, that our data be readily available to our sponsors, to sometimes the government, to bureaucrats, to our schools. Data integrity, data storage, data maintenance and management are very important issues. So I like this quote from Edward Teller. Physics is hopefully simple. Physicists are not. In the same way, I think data probably is pretty simple. Those of us that work with data, not necessarily. What we don't want to do is mismanage our data. We don't want to lose our data. We don't want to render it unuseful based on the way that we manage it. We took the time, the energy, the effort, the expense of collecting it, that we want to make sure we can maintain it and keep it safe. So why is data important? Here are some basic reasons, right? Data helps us record our progress, how close we're getting to our goals, or how our experiments are turning out, right? Sometimes data can form the basis of new research. So you actually need that data when you're going to submit a proposal for funding for your next round of trials, for your next experiments, right? Data is important because when you publish, you're claiming that you cured something, you solved something, you addressed something, you answered something, and the data will help document your claims. The data will also document the work that was done. How many times did you run the experiment? How many animals were involved? How many patients did you see? Which patients got placebo? Which ones did not get placebo? All of those pieces. Sometimes your data will be the basis on getting approval to move forward with your research, whether it be from an institutional authority, a regulatory authority, or a sponsor who's funding your research. Data also helps establish your claims. Perhaps you were the one who created the next wonder drug or the next new device, and someone else simultaneously created the same thing, unbeknownst to you. Your data will show when you created it because you've dated your books, you've dated your records. It can help establish that claim. It can also demonstrate that you had authorization to do something, whether it be your protocol from your animal subjects work or your human subjects work or an institutional approval. That becomes part of your data record to show that you had permission to do what you were doing. So good records. How do we keep good records? I've seen some pretty sloppy records in my time, and I've seen some great ones. So these are some hallmarks of good records. They're legible. Anybody can read them, right? They're up to date. No one wants to wait 3 months to try to record all of their data. You're not going to remember it all. I have trouble remembering what happened this morning, let alone what happened a few days ago. So you want to keep them up to date. You want to make sure they're complete, that they have everything in there, that they're organized, that someone could find it. If you're not there and they had your data, they could figure it out. That they're compliant, that you haven't included patient data that you're not supposed to include, that you haven't included patentable or intellectual property in your data that does not belong there, correct? So you want to make sure it's backed up. Just one copy of your data, this one notebook, this one file on this one computer is probably not going to be enough. You want to make sure that you've got it securely stored and backed up in more than one location. And finally, you want to make sure that your data is in English. Data is the English, is the universal language of science. So you want to be sure that you're putting it in English. That guarantees that anyone in the scientific community should be able to read and understand your data. So who owns the data? There's a lot of varying opinions on this. It could be the sponsor, the donor, the funder of the research. It could be the institution where the research was done, or the institution who employs the investigator. Sometimes it could be the investigator. It could be the community who supplies the data, or the participants that give their samples or their specimens for use in the research. So you want to be sure when you're walking into a project, when you're involving yourself, in the data that you know ultimately who owns it. If you do leave the institution where you are and the data belongs to the institution, it has to stay there. I mean, I'm sure they're going to let you take a copy of it, but you need to be mindful of these things. If the community thinks it owns the data, then it's going to have different expectations than if it doesn't think it owns the data. So kind of keep that in mind. Who owns the data? Data sharing is becoming more and more common, and it's expected in a lot of places. It's intuitive that we want to share our data. That's part of the scientific process. We want to help others make discoveries, and we want to support each other through inquiry. If someone has a new question and my data can help answer your question, I would want to help you with that, right? Sometimes our sponsors mandate it, our institutions mandate it, our protocols mandate it. Our journals sometimes mandate it that we have to be able to and willing to share our data. And sometimes the type of material is what we want to share. Maybe we've developed a new reagent or a new device, and we do want to share that data. Some things that make it complicated, it could be the complexity of the research. Maybe it's just really complex and it's not ready to be shared yet, and you need to put a delay on that. Maybe it's a multi-site endeavor. You've got 6 different institutions collaborating together on this one thing, and you need to outline what data sharing looks like so that no one's prematurely sharing and that everyone has an opportunity to vet what's being shared. There may be export control concerns. So if it's going from one country to another country, there may be exclusions or there may be policies and permissions around that technology leaving one country and going to another. There's also security issues. It may have a dual use it may present a dual use issue. Maybe it could be used for medicine, but it could also be used in terrorism. And you need to be mindful of that there could be a security concern that would prohibit or prevent data sharing. So, digital data poses its own unique sets of challenges because digital data can unfortunately be manipulated in more ways than one. And we want to be mindful and careful about how we track and take care of our digital data, who we allow to have access to our digital data, and how we share our digital data. So thanks for watching this session or this segment on data integrity. And as always, contact me if you need help, assistance, if you have questions or comments. Thank you so much.